19 years ago, at a charity event in Barcelona, a photographer asked a young player to hold a baby for a few seconds. Just a favor. A quick photo. Nobody thought twice about it. The player handed the baby back to its mother, the event moved on, and that picture sat forgotten for almost 2 decades. Nobody in that room had any idea they were looking at the end of his career. Because on July 19, 2026, that baby walked out at MetLife Stadium and started a World Cup final against him. Extra time. Scoreboard reading 0-0 for over 100 minutes. Then, in the dying minutes, one moment decides everything. One team explodes. The other collapses onto the grass. And when the final whistle blows, the man who should have been a 2-time world champion is sitting alone on the pitch, in tears. 19 years and one photograph away, the teenager who just beat him stops his own celebration cold. He turns. He walks straight through the chaos, past his own teammates lifting the trophy behind him, and goes to find the one man in that stadium he came here to beat. What happens in the next 10 seconds is why football people are already calling this the most symbolic scene the sport has produced in years. And almost nobody watching live understood the full weight of it, not until the replays started circulating hours later. This is that story. Before we dive in, if you watched this final live, drop the exact second you realized what was happening in the comments. And if you followed Messi's whole career, hit subscribe, because what we're about to break down is bigger than one hug. Let's start with what's confirmed. Spain beat Argentina 1-0 after extra time in the 2026 final. It was Messi's second World Cup final defeat, after Argentina's 2014 loss to Germany. This time, the man who beat him was on the opposite bench, 19-year-old Yamal. And here's the detail that turned this into more than just a result: Messi and Yamal became the first players ever to start on opposite sides of a World Cup final with a 20-year age gap between them. Not close. Not roughly a generation. A verified first in the history of the sport. A 20-year gap. That's not commentary, that's a historical fact. Fans picked up on it instantly. One reaction that spread everywhere summed it up as a legend and a future legend sharing a moment. Another put it even simpler: someone being consoled by the very kid he inspired is its own kind of full circle story. And this final carried historical weight before a single ball was even kicked. This was the first ever World Cup final between the reigning champions of Europe and the reigning champions of South America. Spain's Euros crown against Argentina's Copa America crown, settled on the biggest stage the sport has. Argentina, for their part, were chasing something almost nobody has pulled off in the modern game: back-to-back World Cup titles, a feat only achieved by Italy in 1934 and 1938, and Brazil in 1958 and 1962. This wasn't just Messi's story, or Yamal's story. It was two footballing institutions colliding, with two generational talents standing at the center of it. Here's what made the loss sting even harder: this wasn't Messi getting outclassed. This was arguably the best World Cup run of his entire career. Go through the road to the final and it reads like a highlight reel that shouldn't belong to a 39-year-old. In the group stage, he scored a hat-trick on his 200th international appearance, equaling a long-standing World Cup goals record. In the round of 32 against Cape Verde, Argentina got dragged to extra time by a debutant nation before scraping through 3-2. In the round of 16 against Egypt, Argentina fell behind, and it was Messi who set up the first comeback goal before scoring the equalizer himself 4 minutes later. In the semi-final against England, Argentina trailed with time running out before two late goals completed the comeback, both created by Messi assists. By kickoff of the final, Messi had 8 goals and 4 assists for the tournament, tied for the most goals of any player in the entire competition. This wasn't a farewell tour. This was a 39-year-old playing some of the best football of his life, dragging his country through 3 separate comebacks just to reach the final. And it still wasn't enough. 1 goal in extra time was the difference. Sport rarely writes clean, satisfying endings. This was proof of that. Now flip to Yamal's side of the story. He was born in July 2007. Messi left Barcelona in 2021. Yamal didn't make his first team debut until 2023, meaning this 19-year-old grew up idolizing a player he never once shared a locker room with, never trained beside, never learned from directly. Everything he knew about Messi, he knew the way millions of kids his age did, through screens, highlight reels, stories. And just days before the final, Messi was asked directly about him. He didn't dodge it. He said plainly that Yamal is a fantastic player, that he'd followed him closely because of his connection to Barcelona, the club he said he'd always wished the best for. Sit with that for a second. The guy whose posters were probably on his wall as a kid just heard the world's greatest player publicly say he rates him. That's not something every 19-year-old gets to hear from his childhood hero right before facing him in the biggest game of both their lives. And Yamal's rise wasn't sudden. This teenager has been arriving at big moments for years. 2 summers before this final, at Euro 2024, a 16-year-old Yamal was already making history, becoming the youngest player ever to score at a men's European Championship, doing it while doubters openly questioned whether the stage was too big for him. He answered them then. He answered them again here, at 19, in a World Cup final against the very player he grew up idolizing. This wasn't a fluke run. It was a pattern continuing, a teenager who keeps showing up at the sport's biggest moments and refuses to shrink from them. This is where the story stops being simple and becomes something more complicated, in the best way. You'd expect a teenager to freeze facing Messi in a World Cup final. Instead, he helped beat him. You'd expect the winning side to only celebrate. Instead, their brightest young star broke off from his own celebration to go find the losing captain. You'd expect Messi, a 9-time Copa America and World Cup winner with nothing left to prove, to want to disappear after a loss like this. Instead, cameras caught him sitting on the pitch, present, absorbing it, not hiding from any of it. You'd expect bitterness between the man who ended an era and the man whose era was ending. Instead, what the world saw was the opposite, the veteran congratulating the teenager once photographed asleep in his arms. Every expectation flipped. And then there's the number that still doesn't make sense no matter how you look at it, 20 years. That's the gap between the two men who started this final on opposite sides. 20 years is long enough for a baby in a photograph to grow up, become a professional footballer, get called up to a national team, win a Euros, and then stand across a World Cup final from the exact man holding him in that photo, and beat him. In almost any other era of football, a 39-year-old doesn't even start a World Cup final, let alone drag his team there with 8 goals along the way. But the numbers back it up in ways that sound almost invented. Messi entered this final having reached the final in 8 of the 13 major tournaments he's played for Argentina, a 61.5% rate almost no player ever approaches in an entire career. He now holds 33 goal contributions across 33 career World Cup matches, a number nobody else in the sport's history has touched. And he remains the only player ever to score in the group stage, round of 16, quarterfinal, semifinal, and final of a single World Cup, a feat he first pulled off in 2022 and has now added to. The math doesn't add up by normal standards. And yet it happened, in front of the entire world, on July 19, 2026, against a teenager born 2 decades after him. You don't need invented quotes to feel the weight of this. The reaction was loud and real everywhere, instantly. Across football media, the phrase that kept repeating was some version of a torch being passed. One major outlet's headline captured it directly: greatness comes full circle. Fans reacted the same way, some focused purely on the symbolism, calling it a moment between a legend and a future legend. Others zoomed out further, describing it simply as the circle of greatness, with Yamal now stepping into it. Different voices, different platforms, same underlying feeling, something bigger than a scoreline had just happened on that field. To understand why this loss cut so deep, you have to go back to 2014, the last time Messi stood on the losing side of a World Cup final, when Argentina fell 1-0 to Germany in extra time, beaten by a single late goal. For years, that defeat was framed as the one gap in his legacy. Then came 2022, and the redemption most of football thought would never arrive. Messi finally lifted the trophy, scoring twice in the final before Argentina won it on penalties. 2026 was supposed to be the encore. Instead, it became a strange echo of 2014. Another final. Another extra-time defeat. Another single goal deciding everything. Except this time, there's no next World Cup on the horizon to make up for it. For Messi, this was almost certainly it. The 39-year-old was in tears after the final whistle, taking in what is likely his last World Cup appearance, not ending in triumph, but as one report put it, ending in dignity. Yards away, Yamal was doing the opposite, dancing, celebrating, living the opening chapter of what a lot of people are already calling the start of Spain's next dynasty. Two players, two ends of a career arc, happening in the same frame, at the same time, on the same patch of grass. You can't script that. It just happened. So when Yamal paused his own celebration, the biggest moment of his career so far, to go find Messi and embrace him, it wasn't a photo op. It was a 19-year-old who grew up on Messi highlights, who once sat in his arms as a baby with neither of them knowing what that photo would become, choosing to acknowledge the man who made him fall in love with this sport in the first place. Whatever comes next for Messi with Argentina, and whatever comes next for Yamal with Spain, July 19, 2026 gave football something rarer than a trophy. A genuine handoff, caught in real time, between the man who defined an era and the one who might define the next. Two players, 20 years apart. One photo that started it all. One final that closed the loop. Argentina's dream of back-to-back titles is over. Messi's story with the national team may be over too. But the sport itself just kept moving the way it always does, from one generation's hands into the next, on a field in New Jersey, in front of the entire world watching it happen live. If this one hit you the way it hit us, tell us in the comments what you think Messi's next chapter looks like, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the moments that actually matter in football.